I'm going to talk to you about the work, particularly of Dark Sky International, and my involvement from Bodmin Moor. I'm the delegate for Dark Sky International, used to be known as the International Dark Sky Association. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the dark skies that we have at Bodmin Moor. So we achieved international dark sky status in 2017. This accolade is awarded by Dark Sky International, which is based in Tucson in the USA. They are an organization that's basically set up to help restore the nighttime environment, protecting communities, particularly from the harmful effects of light pollution. And we do that through outreach, advocacy, and conservation. There are now 20 dark sky places in the UK, with 8 in England, 2 of which are in Cornwall, Bodmin Moor and West Penwith. In each of those areas, we've got delegates. Those delegates are responsible for doing the annual return to Dark Sky International, as well as basically helping to coordinate the efforts. And we work together. There's a group of us, and we regularly chat and discuss things about outreach, UK policy, lobbying, etc. We have our own website. It's called Dark Sky UK, which you can have a look at. And mainly the thing that got me into it was the education and outreach side of things. So as part of the designation, we provide regular outreach that focuses on certain areas. And one of the things which we learned very early on is that if we use the wow factor of the night sky using telescopes, naked eye activities, showing the asterisms, the beauty of the night sky, that helps you to discuss light pollution and the adverse effects of light pollution. The Bodmin Moor group is based at Carolyn Observatory, so we're Carolyn Observatory. So let's talk a little bit about light pollution. How bad is it? It's pretty bad, to be fair. There's a survey back in 2023 from the CPRE campaign for the protection of rural England. They didn't do it last year because of the election, but it's getting worse. A lot of people are seeing fewer stars now than they were before. We do a sort of count within Orion, and the number of stars is going down. It's estimated as well that quite a lot of our outdoor lighting is going up into the sky, which, when you think about it, light is energy, and that's expenditure too, so it's wasted. This is a nice picture of Cornwall, and the AOMB, which Bodmin Moor is designated within, is within that little bit, which has got Cornwall AOMB. West Penwith is that bit down there, and that's got designation as well. So why is light pollution bad? Well, it's got bad effects on wildlife. We know now that it has got adverse effects on human health. There was a paper published a little while ago in The Lancet which showed that exposure to light overnight increased the risks of diabetes. We are also reasonably sure now, based on the evidence published, that light exposure at the wrong time of the day increases one's risk of heart disease, but also cancer, particularly breast cancer in shift workers. So there's little doubt that exposure to light at the wrong time is not good for our bodies. And then if you factor in climate change, the financial loss associated with these lights that are going upwards, not downwards, the adverse impact on astronomy, and of course the social inequalities. I think sometimes we forget that. If you live in an area that's lit up very heavily because there's a thought that doing that might help prevent crime, it does seem to highlight, if you'll excuse the pun, but it does highlight that that might be the case. So how are you going to feel if you live in a place like that? I would suggest not ideal. So it's surely a no-brainer to turn off the lights. And I'm really actually quite proud of Cornwall and Cornwall Council and they've been steering this quite heavily, not just as a green initiative, but in terms of the financial benefits as well, turning off the lights between midnight and 5 o'clock in the morning. And there's been very little comeback on this. So I think this is really good. So as an organisation, what do we do as well? Well, the key thing is about this education. Sharing the beauty of the night sky, but also using that to help people learn about the adverse effects, and what can they do about light pollution themselves. What sort of things can they do? Let's embrace some new ideas. How are we going to help with that? Including we, for example, have had lots of groups, Cub Scouts, children's groups, and groups of all ages coming along to events, and that's a really good way of spreading the message. This is one of our signposts. That's at the Routor car park. You can see Routor in the distance, designating it as a international dark sky landscape. This is one of our events from a few years ago. You can see there's quite a lot of heads with Sibleyback Lake in the background. That was a really well attended one. I think the next one shows some of the telescopes that we have there. The big one in the front, that's a Dobsonian, and I was able to show over 100 people the Whirlpool Galaxy, and that's a quick image of it. It wouldn't have looked quite like that down the telescope, but you would have been able to see a little bit of the morphology of that galaxy, which is about 12.5 million light years away. Pretty impressive. The other telescope was pointed at Venus, not Mars that day, but this is a separate image we took of Mars, and you can see a little white blob there. That's actually a cloud over the largest volcano in the solar system on another planet. That's pretty cool. This is heading up for the meeting, so you can see there we've got lots of telescopes that we use. Nemo the dog, making sure I'm doing a good job. And as the sun goes down, we start to see the beautiful parts of the sky. Another image there. That's one from Arthur's Hall that we did. Right, so what can we see? Well, beautiful night sky. This is an image taken actually from the observatory. That spray of colour and dust, that's actually the Milky Way spread across the sky. Absolutely beautiful. And when you get higher resolution images with the camera pointing directly above, you start to see that's the North American Nebula. This is the center of the Milky Way, looking out into one of its spiral arms. Every single one of those dots is a star. Pretty incredible. In May, we had the amazing aurora, and this was actually taken just a few yards away from the observatory, with all of the beautiful colors, the red, the greens. It was phenomenal. I've seen the aurora now from Norway, from Iceland, and from Cornwall, and honestly, it was so beautiful seeing it from Cornwall. Absolutely amazing. And this was the sunspot that created that. It's shifted around to the side, but that was taken with one of our telescopes as well. So we use people looking at these things to help spread the awe of the night sky. This is the Andromeda Galaxy. It's 2.5 million light years away. So the light that we're seeing now took 2.5 million years to get here. Humans weren't even wandering the planet then. The Heart and Soul Nebula. Comet Neowise, that was from a few years ago. We've got telescopes that will show Jupiter in all of its glory with its bands. And very recently I went up to Kit Hill and took a picture of Comet Tsushinshan Atlas with its really long tail. That's one of the images that we got. That's a higher resolution image of the North American Nebula. The Horsehead Nebula, can't see that so well with the telescope, but I can take pictures of it. You can see this. This is the Orion Nebula, about 1,400 light years away, so not that far. But imagine what we were doing 1,400 years ago, and that's what the light is, how long the light's taken to get to us. Some galaxies, and another galaxy that I took. This is about 7.5 hours of an image. It's about 12 million light years away, but It's spectacular when you can show people like this. And the trouble with light pollution is it makes it more difficult for us to be able to see things like this. I use instruments like the sky quality meter that gives us numbers which tells us how good the sky is. That number 21.4, that's pretty good. That tells us that Bodmin Moor is a dark sky place. So please, let's try and keep it that way. So I really hope the future is dark, if you'll excuse me saying it in that way, but that means trying to preserve it. We need to help people think about the impact of light pollution. We use tech, we use Space is Cool to try and help spread that message. And of course, we all have to bear this problem of climate change. And if we can use things like the beauty of the night sky to kind of push that endeavour, then so be it. It's a win-win.
Hello, my name's Carolyn Kennett, and I'm an archaeoastronomy based in the southwest of the UK. My work takes me onto Bodmin Moor, and I've been looking at a number of the sites which have been involved in the Monumental Improvement National Landscape Project. I'm particularly concerned about how ancient communities connected with the sky and the relationships between monuments, megalithic sites, such as stone circles and stone rows and the enigmatic King Arthur's Hall, and how that relates to the sky above and how those people connected to the cosmos during the course of the year. One of the sites which interested me recently is Godiva Stone Circle. Godiva has been, for the last 100 years or so, surrounded by trees, which is part of a plantation, and recently this plantation has been felled. This has exposed quite a lot of the sky above and made us consider how the circle would have looked when it was positioned on the top of the ridgeway. Its position is really key in the landscape. It's probably mid-position on the moor itself, but it's also quite mid-position in that area of Cornwall from the north and south coast. And with its elevation, it would be a place perhaps that people would have come to meet and been well regarded as a site which reached into the skyline. And as the tree has been felled, it gives a completely different impression when you go up there. Before, it gave this impression of being enclosed and very kind of intimate space. Nowadays, when you go up there, there's this whole new view, and you are, as I say, quite elevated on the moor, and you can see a number of the other hills and tors around you. Some of these, like Brown Willy, seems to have been positioned with the sky and the movement of the sun in mind. So the movement of the sun, it goes through an annual movement from summer solstice to winter solstice and back again. Godiva Circle seems to have been placed with the positions of the hills in mind. And when the sun moves through its annual cycle, you can see that certain hills have sunrises and sunsets over them at specific times of the year. So these are important times, like the summer solstice and the equinox, the midpoint of the year. And standing in Godiva Circle, one of the hilltops, which has recently become re-exposed, so recently the trees which have gone down, which hid it behind, they have now completely been removed, and you can suddenly see the hilltop, and it's Brown Willy, which is the tallest hill on Bodmin Moor. Now, if you are at Godiva Circle on the summer solstice and you are there for the sunset, you will find that the sun will set over Brown Willy. This isn't the only circle on the moor where this happens. Craddock Moor has a similar thing where if you visit on the summer solstice sunset, the sunset will happen over Brown Willy, as does a single standing stone on the Hurlers landscape further into the southeast of the moor. And it seems to have been this repeated interest in summer solstice sunset and Brown Willy, and the positioning of sites on the moor, and particularly to the south of that hill. But Godiva also has other alignments. It has two other alignments. These alignments were noted by John Barnett in the 1980s, and these are equinox alignments. It has an equinox sunrise over Kilmartor and an equinox sunset over Hawk's Tor. He also mentions a Candlemas alignment. So Candlemas would be about the 1st of February. So this is one of these kind of mid-position between the equinox and the solstices. So you then split the year into 8, and they're known as cross-quarter days. And it would be a sunrise at Godiva, and it's over Stows Hill, which is once again in the southeast landscape. And he talks about these alignments on Godiva as being the most alignments on the moor. And you can actually see possibly why that would occur, because you're in such an elevated landscape that you can see so many hills and tors around. It does make you wonder if the stone circle was put there as maybe as a meeting place for all different types of year, or whether the sky as a whole was of interest rather than one specific point of the year. So maybe people were using this to come and meet and celebrate the sky as a whole aspect of what was going on there, rather than just one individual celebration at one point of the year. Interestingly, there is a number of stone barrows which run into the stone circle, and these cairns and barrows are in a linear line. And if you were to approach from that direction, from the barrows to the stone circle, you would also have an event, but this isn't to do with the sun. This is to do with the moon, and it's the moon at its extreme position. And it's a northerly setting moon at its most extreme position that you would see the moon set. We are actually in the year where you can witness this. So this cycle, this lunar cycle, is a little bit more complex than the sun cycle, and the moon cycle happens only every 18.6 years, and it's known as the major standstill cycle. But you can visit the circle each month during the course of the next year as the moon reaches the most northerly position, and see the moon set as you were walking along these barrows over the direction of the circle itself. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping to capture during the course of this year. As I say, the moon cycle is a little bit more tricky to understand, and people would question why they would perhaps mark the moon in the way that they've marked the sun. But if you were to think of people heading out, particularly in the winter months, when daylight hours are very low, they would use and utilize the full moon to its full extent. And if you were to get to the full moon nearest the winter solstice, you're going to find that illuminates the landscape in a way that perhaps isn't possible at the rest of the moon's month. So you can extend your activities into the night time by using that full moon. So maybe it's a time where you could go hunting, or a time for celebration. And the full moon nearest the winter solstice would have been key, and that would also be the one which would be setting in that most northerly position. So it's working in opposite to the sun. So the sun would be rising and setting very far to the south at that point in time, whereas the moon is going to the north. So moving on from Godiva, one of the other sites which has been involved in the National Landscape Monumental Improvement Project is King Arthur's Hall. And King Arthur's Hall has been revealed to be this amazing ancient site through the course of this project. Its position in the landscape, again, lends itself very much to looking at the sky. Particularly when you approach from the south. The approach from the south, you start to see King Arthur's Hall on a ridgeway, and it draws the eye upwards, skywards, to what's happening in the sky above. And if you were to approach at night, you would see the northern sky directly above King Arthur's Hall itself. Now, the northern sky has stars which rotate round, which are the same stars that we would see all year round. You wouldn't necessarily see them in the same position because they would be rotating round a central point. But these are called circumpolar stars. So they have familiar patterns, such as the Plough, which is part of the constellation Ursa Major, and Cassiopeia. These constellations or patterns in the sky have been known since the ancient Greek and well before, but they are the Ptolemy ancient Greek constellations. But I'm sure people in prehistory here in Cornwall would have had their own stories about these stars and would have given different tales about what they meant to them. And particularly because these stars are so bright and so recognizable, some of the stories about them have very ancient lines which extend well before the ancient Greeks talked about them. So the one which forms the plough or the saucepan, which is the bear, they think that story predates the ancient Greeks, probably by about 10,000 years, and is known as the cosmic hunt. And one of the things about the stars is that they would appear as either bears on a hunt or as people following bears on a hunt holding a cooking pot. And we know that the date of that story predates the building of King Arthur's Hall and probably was quite widespread because that story originates not only in Africa but also in North America. So it was transported over with stories into different continents. But we don't know the stories that people told here in the Southwest. They may have had their own stories about what those stars meant. The other thing that I should probably talk about is that those stars aren't in exactly the same position as they were when King Arthur's Hall was built. So at the moment we have a star called Polaris, which is very close to the North Celestial Pole. So it's very central to this group of stars which rotate round a central point. And Polaris is virtually on that central point. Due to something known as precession, which is a 26,000 year cycle, Polaris wouldn't be on that position, but different stars would have taken that position. Those stars move on and off that position every few hundred years. So it's a very slow cycle. It's 26,000 years, as I say. But back in the Neolithic, they would have seen different stars in and around that central position with different these stars coming round. But it's interesting to think that maybe it's those stars rotating round which would have interested them at King Arthur's Hall. The other thing which has been talked about is how wet inside the hall is and whether that was fed by a spring and whether that had a watery base. So a watery base would have been interesting for people who were stood on the edge of the bank because they would have seen the reflection of the sky. So once again, you're talking about reflecting quite a large aspect of the sky. So maybe one of the larger features like the Milky Way would have been of interest to them and the reflection of that in the pool itself. Or maybe they were thinking about reflecting the sun or the moon, which they could have considered to be deities, downcasting those into the water itself. Maybe playing with that, putting their hand in, rippling the water and speaking to their ancestors that could have been contained in the stars themselves. But we don't really know what they were doing, but it's nice to think about all these different aspects and how they may have connected to the cosmos above. So one of the aspects of looking at these ancient sites, which I think is really key to me, is that we have access to wonderful dark skies on Bodmin Moor, and there is the dark sky designation, which Wayne has spoken about. And it's an opportunity for us to visit these sites in almost pristine conditions and really connect to how people would have approached and used the sites back in prehistory. And it's really important that we retain that, look after that, and respond to the call that we should reduce light pollution within the area. And because it is a wonderful thing that we can offer is that Bodmin Moor is particularly pristine dark skies. And it's wonderful that we are able to go out and enjoy those, and as the ancient people would have done.